Hi, this is Pierre Sabak, and I'm speaking to Philip Kinsella today, and we're going to be talking about his latest book, The Guardians of the Dead. Now, I just want to begin and to tell you what I really liked about the book and really what the book is about. It's an interesting book because it's really an autobiography, but it's an autobiography in terms of you as a medium. And so it's a book about spirituality. But I think what's very interesting about this book is it's almost like a textbook in how to develop your psychic awareness. And it's combined with this autobiography. And I think, what's very interesting about it is that a complete novice can come to the work and they can find something from the work, but also that you delve into some very deep philosophical areas. And so the book really covers all ranges, whether you're a complete beginner who wants to learn about how to become a medium, to somebody who, like myself, who studied the esoterica pretty much a lifetime. And I'm reading this book and I'm getting new insights. And so it's a really incredible work. We're seeing that there is, if you like, this reintegration with consciousness and this phenomenon. And I think it intersects at every level. And it's particularly true and prevalent with your book, The Guardians of the Dead, because
Yes.
that is, your forays into the spirit world. But the spirit world is
Yes.
so much interconnected with other type of paranormal experiences.
Oh, yes.
And that's what I find very interesting are the two now. And we're in this time of synthesis, but this synthesis is occurring where people are beginning to join the dots and to put the connections together for the first time. And so this idea that a being can be spiritual and physical simultaneous, and that you have different
Yes.
reality is really interesting. And it's something that I think ufology, spiritualism, the paranormal, all of these different intersecting fields are beginning to come together and to realize, and
Correct.
underpinning all of that is consciousness. And so
Yes,
and
correct.
this is why I find your work is so liberating and so interesting to read,
Thank
because
you.
you're not pinned down by a dogma. And I really want to begin, first of all, with my first question, which is, why does a person want to become a medium? Or is there something that occurs in a person's life where they just suddenly say, this is something interesting that I really want to pursue? Or is that just something that we're all naturally mediums, and that just most people, because of the type of society we live in, that we've suppressed that side of ourselves? So if you could give me a little bit of background in terms of why you wanted to become a clairvoyant and why you wanted to develop that side of your personality, which I think is a very intrinsic side of the human being.
Yes, well, Pierre, firstly, thank you for having me on your show. I'm really honored. You know, I have to say, Pierre, to bring a smile to your face, sir, I am so pleased to be among esteemed minds. I always say that, and honest,
Okay.
good people.
Yeah.
And, you know, we still scratching around in the dark, but, you know, at some
Mm.
level, you know, all these wonderful minds and
Mm.
your work is, I sing your praises to other people.
Perfect. Thank
And
you.
I mentioned you on a few American programs as well.
Brilliant. I really
Um,
appreciate that.
and that's
Thank you.
I don't have any scores to point to scores to gain, but I just think it's wonderful that we're among great minds that you know can think about this.
Yeah.
Thank you. And yes, I guess that to some degree I was always interested in life after death. When I was younger, I had a grandfather who passed of a heart attack. And of course, no one spoke about death during those days back in the 80s. And of course, that led me into the question of what happened to us when we die, because even as a kid, I'd had, obviously you're aware, some very strange experiences and going much into later life. So the clairvoyance actually initiated when I was in my late 20s. And unbeknown to me, I think that had been initiated through shock of several more passings that had occurred, namely my maternal grandmother, who it must be said was psychic. So I can't really answer the question as to whether or not I was born with it or you can develop it. I think there's a combination of both. I think we all have a brain. And well, I hope we do. And if you have a brain, you have a psyche, consciousness, which facilitates the organ itself and holds it within this matrix. And this, of course, fascinated me because I was more interested in human genesis to begin with, where we came from, who made us, where we evolved from. And I remembered at school I used to get laughed at and picked on quite a lot by a lot of the pupils who were more interested in football, or, you know, the young lasses then. I was more like my maternal grandfather, you know, had my head in books. And it was, of course, my paternal grandfather who'd passed, because my maternal grandfather lived for a long time afterwards. I was more interested in books and kind of like these UFO subjects and psychic phenomena. So I believe that there's a combination of these elements that come together, and certainly there must also be some type of life mapping, which I also describe within the book, because I believe that from a soul level, there has to be more to us than just mere flesh and blood vehicles with a biological sell-by date. And I always joke with that, Pierre. I was thinking, you know,
Mm.
but it just came on. And I think it came deep within my soul, within my heart, that I wanted to know the truth. And the system that we serve tells us that UFOs, for one, don't exist, and that psychic phenomena is a lot of claptrap. So either I was lying or they were lying. And I wanted to know which of us was lying. And of course, I discovered that through the understanding and application of consciousness, that there is more to us than just physical beings, that we have what is called a soul. And this opened up a whole paradigm of different areas of research and understanding. So that's primarily how I got involved in it. I'd seen a medium who worked for the FBI in America. She was here in England. She worked in England. She was a very good medium, used to work on cold soul cases. And she was the very first medium I met. And she blew me away because she knew I'd gone there with quite a harsh mind, because I'm very black and white. I have to experience things. And but she wiped the floor with me, and she said to me, "You'll be back in 2 years' time to develop." And she told me some things that no one else knew. Literally, she didn't know anything about me at all because she got my name wrong. And of course, those days, they didn't really have the connections we have today to find out about people. And so that's how it developed, yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting. And so you gradually began to develop and hone these skills. I think there's another part within your book where you talk about how the individual can develop themselves
Yes.
at a psychic level. And again, you talk about your spirit guide, Wolf, yeah, Wolf Song. So, do all mediums have a spirit guide, or is it just that some mediums have spirit guides? And how does this spirit guide play a part in terms of your life and your relationship with this spirit guide as well?
It's really bizarre, Pierre, because, you know, when I was studying UFOs, which was my first subject, and then I started talking to the dead, I thought, my goodness me, my reputation would go right down the pan. I thought no one would take me seriously, even though I was serious myself. Now, when I'd gone to see the medium, her name was Pearl. She was very highly recommended. She told me that I had a spirit guide called Wolfsong, and I remembered groaning, thinking, oh Lord, I've heard of those before. And it was, yes, a North American Indian. Oh, how ironic. So it wasn't until I had gone back to see her after there were more tragedies, more deaths which had occurred, and one of which was a friend of mine who passed with cancer, who had, I must state for the record, physically presented himself after he had died and after I had requested him to do so. That was a weird situation involving mirrors that I picked up a secondhand book in a bookshop called Reunions by Dr. Raymond Moody, and he suggested the experiment. But the spirit guide, when I started to meditate, because I started to see lights around people and I couldn't understand what they were, and they were different colors and very bright around people, and sometimes when there weren't people around, and I thought, well, I might have a tumor or something. But it turned out that mediums see these lights, and we still don't understand what they are. You know,
Hmm.
they may be the energy of the deceased or the portal or their dimension. We don't know.
Sorry, I just want to comment there. When my father was dying, he started to see lights, and I think that that's actually quite common because that is an
Yes.
indication of the spirit world. But
Yes, well, yeah, as we know that light carries information, the colors, we don't know what the different colors mean. But anyway, I was meditating, thinking, okay, so Pearl wants me to start up being a psychic medium. How do I do it? I had no idea. So she said meditation. So I started to meditate, and I said to this spirit guide, I said, okay, so if you're a North American Indian, can you give me I want your name. I must admit, Pierre, I was quite hard. So he showed me this image in my mind, and it was within the mind of these wolves and a North American Indian playing a flute. And I kind of thought with my logical mind saying, oh, wolf song, wolf song, wolf song, that's your name. Okay, wolf song, prove it. Nothing came back until the next day I went to work. I will never forget it. I was serving some customers. A chap came up to me, a big Canadian guy, and I was looking at his T-shirt underneath his jacket, looking at his chest. He probably thought I was odd. And then he clocked on what he was, and he opened his, and it was wolves and a North American Indian playing a flute. And he said, got it from Canada, man, you got to go there. Well, I took myself afterwards into a stockroom and I steeled myself because I thought, my God, there's a discarnate entity that's proving to me of his existence and his name beyond this physical realm. So I kind of understood at that point that I was dealing with a discarnate entity that is called a spirit guide. And very strangely, the more I connected with the spirit guide, the stronger the connection became. It's not like I go up and demonstrate to people and say, oh, my spirit guide's here, or put on a big show. I wanted him to prove to me that he was real, and he did continuously. So I understood at that point that mediums, and in fact, I think every single one of us has some form of guide. What's interesting is that Sir Philip Pullman, the author of The Dark Materials, in his films, in his books rather, and the film, the wonderful adaptation on TV, all the humans have a demon, it's called, and it's like an animal guide, and it's part of the human. And I thought, dear Lord, how amazing is that? So I think we all have them. And I think that they work on the lower levels of the body's energy centers. People have gut feelings. Maybe that's the part of the psyche working on a stronger level. But they do exist. And for those people that don't believe in them, I'll tell them they do exist. And the reason that they come in a guise like a North American Indian or a Roman or a nun or a monk is because we are able to differentiate them from a deceased loved one who's passed over. Because if my guide Wolfsong turned up in a suit, I wouldn't know who the hell he was. So it could be that in a past life, they themselves had adopted that culture and felt comfortable on the other side to become what we call the guide. And we're still in our early stages of understanding exactly what their roles really are. But that is what happened to me with it. And I still feel the presence of the guide. I talk to him within my mind. And even though people say we're all crazy, well, he must be doing some form of connection from the other side to make the link easier for the deceased to come through or connect in the background. At least that's what we've been told.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know from I had some kind of spiritual experience with a light being, and that involved it revealing itself, and it also involved the barking of a dog. So I kind of concur with that. And again, I do have a great appreciation of the wolf. I think the wolf is a very beautiful animal. So yeah, I think that's very interesting. How then, if one of our viewers is very interested in terms of developing their psychic awareness, are there particular techniques that they can do in order to develop this awareness? For example, could they make contact with their guardian or demonic spirit or familiar spirit? Are there techniques? So, I mean, to begin with, you obviously talked about meditation. Would that be combined with specific types of techniques, or is it very different to the individual?
I think they are very different to the individual. One of the things we have to understand is that our consciousness, the programming, has been initiated since birth. And I think that this programming by a system is telling us that this is real and this is not, and therefore shutting down those areas of the brain which are vital in being accessed by consciousness. Because we're left-brained and right-brained, and I think most people are more left-brained than right-brained. So this centralized programming limits the individual to think outside the box. And remember, thought is consciousness. It's not, imagination isn't something that's in a little box that we open now and again, and he imagined that. Well, I hope so, because imagination is nothing less than the mind. So everything imagined is real to an extent, although all of that that's imagined operates in a higher frequency of awareness that we can't see. So I love to use the analogy that we are all like, think of the mobile phone. You've got the physical hardware, and the mobile phone receives signals that we can't see. And those signals are unique to the individual. So think of the soul as coming into your vessel, your biological form, and it's recording its experience from birth till death and going through all these varied experiences before the vessel, the physical vehicle, is no longer needed. And if your mobile phone breaks or is damaged, the signal is still pure. And if it breaks and dies, then the signal will return to source or perhaps find another conduit with which to connect with. Now, I think that there are certain techniques. I didn't really have a technique to begin with. I was more interested in reaching out to those that have crossed over. And I wanted to know that they were okay. I wanted to know that life wasn't meaningless, that we just existed and died. Because at that point, I didn't want to live anymore because it made no sense to me. What's the point in going through all of this random stuff only to die? For what? What does love mean? What does art, creation, literature mean? Music, these things that we take so for granted within this life. And thank God for that, because it fills us with so much love and inspiration. So I really used a technique of reaching out. And when I started applying this, I said to them, I want no nonsense. I want black and white facts. I don't want, fairy tales or anything like that. I don't want grandma to come through. Oh, I've got your grandma here who'd love cooking and she loved gardening. Well, I think that would apply to 95% of our grandmothers. I wanted them to come through. I wasn't interested in names because anyone can throw out a name, a John, Mary, Sue, Smith. I wanted them, because I always joke and say when we pass over, I think the first thing we discard is our name. And the second thing is our national insurance number. So from their side of life, what was interesting was that through my learning, I was trying to understand about energy, about getting in tune with how we feel. Meditation is important because it removes us from the centralized thoughts that we've been conditioned with. We're removing our consciousness away from the original platform of awareness and bringing ourselves into what they call a heightened sense of awareness. And at that level, we are able then to create or meditate, create an image. And this raises the energy around the individual to a higher vibrational frequency. And I believe that you start to light up like a light bulb, and that those on the other side are able to see it and, come forward thinking, well, what is this? Why is this different to the normal minds that are on Earth? Because most people are in a kind of like a conditioned bubble, and they'll forever remain there. But people like yourself and many other people are not just being a medium, it's stretching the mind beyond the confines of the material, thinking outside the box, that starts to push us away from the programming. And I think that other entities, other dimensions of awareness are connected or interested in you, and knowing, oh, there's something different about this soul. They've really pushed themselves. It's like I wanted to get off the wheel. I did not want to be a robot. I wanted to explore these areas that the system was telling us do not exist.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed this, that in particular with individuals who are either extremely, extremely intelligent, so in a conventional sense, or people who think outside of the box and are very creative, they do tend to draw in these entities. And I think that, like yourself, that these entities are able to read the thought pattern.
Yes.
Which goes up into the ether, into the atmosphere. I think that we ourselves will be able to do this very shortly. It wouldn't surprise me that we're almost on the verge of having the technologies ourselves. And that's interesting, because then you can read every single thought that has ever occurred. But I do think that, like yourself, that it's almost like a personal signature in which a person gives off. And they're interested in divergence, in what makes a person different, and particularly individuals who stand out and those people who resonate. And that's where they try to form a kind of a coherence with that individual, and they try to link onto that individual.
Yes.
And I think that in itself is very interesting, because then we traverse not only the philosophical and the scientific, but we're also traversing the occult and the paranormal.
Oh, yes.
And I think in many respects, they're all one and the same. And there has been a tendency within, shall we say, earlier research to differentiate all these different areas and to categorize them. And I'm not saying
Yes.
that there's anything wrong with that, but also we do have to appreciate that they are closely entwined together and that they work together.
Yes.
So,
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. So
I,
in answer to your question, Pierre, yes, I agree. I think that, depending on the mindset of the individual or the hardware, as it were, the brain, the human brain, depending on the thought waves, the vibrational energy signatures that have been sent out, most people can submit to negative forces and other people can, just be open to them. And other people can also connect to positive forces. So I absolutely agree that, on the earth plane here in the physical, that many people have unfortunately, brought in a lot of the darker forces, the darker energies. And we also know that there are lighter energies or good energies. You hear of the good angels and the fallen angels. And we have this constant theme of good and bad on the earth. But I will tell you that it is all to do with the energy signatures of the individual, which, can also lead us into other areas of exploration with regards to how consciousness works. And this is where I wanted my research to take me. I'm thinking, well, if the dead can talk to me, and I always joke and say, well, we're more dead than them, they're more alive than we are, we're more dead than they are, because we're only on the earth plane for a certain period of time before we ourselves expired physically. Then using the conduit, the brain, if I can talk to the dead, then that must explain why the UFOs are normally interested in individuals like ourselves for other reason. And of course, that's something we're still looking into. But certainly looking at the world through our eyes at the moment shows us that it's not a good place to be in at the moment. And I don't think it ever really has been a good place to be in. Only these historical events that raise upwards and where we are at the moment. And I think a lot of people are very clever. I think we're all waking up. A lot of people are waking up to the fact that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, and this is deceit. And of course, I knew that there was proof in life after death because all these eminent neurologists and men of science were secretly studying the subject. Many of these doctors and professors have released books on the subject of life after death. And yet the system, the media circus, still carries on as though the whole thing is a joke. And this is what they want. They want the public to believe that they are a robot, that they are just flesh and blood, that they are a servant to the system, and they invoke fear upon the individual. And I think this is doing a lot of damage to the human psyche. So, and it's going to be a hell of a job to educate people into the belief that there are other dimensions of awareness, not just those who have crossed over, but also other species out there that operate on different levels of awareness. So yeah, it's tough. I think it's very interesting also because we just don't know. We only have, I have seen the other side on one occasion, and I think since that happened, I get these images which I found out that Professor Clive Staple Lewis went through the same things that I do, although he couldn't work out what they were. He had these moments called joy, and these would appear, which they still do today randomly, where an image would come and it would seem to superimpose over the reality that you're in and put all the pieces to the jigsaw puzzle of life together, and you can see eternity. You feel it. It's like all the pieces to come together, and then the whole concept of that visual processing and sensory connection shatters, and you're left, you can't get the residue back. I have a lot of people, when I do readings for them, one lady did make me laugh. She said to me, well, is there enough room on the other side for all those people? And I said, well, think about your mobile phone, madam. The signal doesn't take up any space whatsoever. It's operating on a different frequency. And I said, well, that these frequencies of awareness are around us. They just need an instrument, a conduit with which to connect with. And there is also the idea as well about no time. People say to me, well, what do they mean when there is no time on the other side? What am I going to do all day? Well, I say, well, that's a very human question, because we are incarnate into human form. That is a very earthly question. And I think that when we separate from this matrix, that we become aware of our greater reality that we were connected to before. It's almost, I call it the awakening. So it's not something alien or different. I think that the awareness of self is heightened because we're no longer restricted within a limited flow of conscious awareness through the brain. And I think that through the severance of the soul from the body, it initiates this immediate recall. And this posed the question to me also about what is life? I get this question a lot of times from people that I read for. What does life mean? What does it all mean? And I said, well, I have a theory about that, although it can't be proven. Although the evidence of life after death is evident, we still don't know. But I have a theory. And I believe that, we incarnate from the other side. We're still trying to work out how that is achieved, but we incarnate. And through our incarnation, the process of incarnation, we forget our heritage. And when we open our eyes and we start to breathe, and we look at the world with from a fresh perspective and a blank canvas, and what's happening is that from birth till death, we're just recording all of our experiences, because when we pass back, we can't take, our goods with us. We can't take our money with us, or our car, or anything else. It is just experience. And I believe that perhaps it is feasible to assume that the one that they call God, or the pure consciousness that we're all connected to, when we pass back to the other side, that our experiences are fed back into the mind of God, so that this mind of God that we're all part of continues this process of creation, and that we then are afforded our heritage, or our passage back to what we call the other side, because of the journey that we took when we elected to come down here. But I will joke with you, Pierre. I will tell you, I always say to people, we must have been drunk on the other side before we came down here. I think through our deciding, everyone kind of like cringes. You want me to go to Earth? Have you heard about that? So you have to have a sense of humor. But I think there's a more deeper, much more shocking, in a nice way, shocking reality that we're all connected to. And through the process of forgetting, I think that that's important also, because if we knew where we were from, then we would just sit and vegetate and do nothing until we pass back again. So, I wanted to find out within my research, like you, Pierre, you're a brilliant author and researcher yourself. You kind of want to get your fingers in everything to find out the truths of everything. And it's been a strange journey. I mean, there's the man that believes in UFOs, and now he talks to the dead. But what I found more than anything was that there was a lot of respect from people. I didn't suffer as much as I thought I would. And, I'm not saying about revert. I don't subscribe to that. But fascinated by being able to link with these alternative dimensions, and we've got to get away from this whole thing about putting things in pigeonholes, like there's life after death in that box, and there's UFOs in that box, there's cryptozoology in that box, there's demons. There seems to be, I think it's all linked to consciousness, and I think that creation itself is all a conscious entity, whether positive or negative, and we are merely the conduit within this reality that is able to connect, or these other awarenesses are able to connect through to us. And not so much the people, God love them, who do not have that awareness yet, or do not believe, because they narrow their field of conscious intent.
Yeah, I mean, I like your analogy about the universe. And again, I do think that the universe is a conscious entity. It's a conscious organism. And again, I also see this with light as well, that light is consciousness. It's pure consciousness.
Oh, yes.
And I think that what's interesting is that when light changes, then it changes the forms on the planet as well. And I think that things such as evolution occur very quickly due to the type of photon or the light in some way. So, for example, when they go back to Mars, what we'll see is that the human form may change, and that may change very quickly because of the light, which is different. So again, looking at this, that everything is interconnected, I think is extremely important. And then there is really, when we begin to break it down, there is no barrier between the normal and the paranormal. And that veil really doesn't exist. It's just a matter of attention or a point of view. So I think
Yes.
it's extremely interesting. As a psychic, was there one particular individual who really stood out and who was a real inspiration, either professionally in terms of learning how to develop your gifts, or just a writer or somebody who inspired you?
Well, Pierre, I will tell you, there's been a few. Now, I have to thank, although I didn't mention him in my book, I have worked with Tony Stockwell on numerous occasions doing platform work, big stage work. And he is the kindest of gentlemen. He is a brilliant man, and I have him to thank as well. I have you also to thank, Pierre, because your work is brilliant, and I'm sorry, but I have to say to you that your work is brilliant. Your books, your research, amazing. There was also another lady called Marion Goodfellow, and she believed in me when I didn't want to do mediumship. I just didn't want anything to do with it. And I remembered she shoved me out there on platform for my first ever demonstration of clairvoyance. And she really believed in me, and I loved her. And my grandmother also, my maternal grandmother, who was psychic, and obviously my twin and I had the very bizarre UFO experience with her back in her back garden when we raised around about the age of 13, a summer's day, the silver orb that came down. So, looking back, all these wonderful people, some of them I will say very gently because I have no ego. One particular lady, very high up lady in the world, in England, was of great support to me and my brother. And she was a very strong support to us both as twins. Wonderful, and I really don't want to mention who that is on this show because I'm not someone that's got any ego, but she's the top lady of England, and we were very inspired. Our journey as twins, from our failed children's works, our books, our creations, everything changed. I think when we had the vision, my twin and I had the vision of the angel and of the being held by this force, and the lion, the face of the lion in the clouds above in the sky, dark sky, was amazing. It was almost as if those on the other side knew that we were defeated, or we felt defeated through a project that we created, a children's character, Magnus the Micro-Mod, that had been through so much. And we had, at the end, we thought that we had failed. Many years of trying to get him off the ground, many dubious characters coming in, trying to take him from us both. I think that when we give it our all, when we really give something our all, Pierre, and then we find that we are defeated constantly, and there's a part of your soul that kind of opens or submits to this defeat. And I think that sometimes greater forces, powerful forces come in. And it is the most inspiring, beautiful thing, because that did happen. One such event happened with me and my brother through the last small print of Magnus the Micro-Mod. And we had no money, we were broke, we were broken as well. It just seemed like we were going nowhere. And then, of course, those, I call them, the bosses, came in and gave us 3 signs, which were very powerful. And I think that changed a lot for me then, because I knew that on a stronger level, that there are good people out there in the world, wonderful people. They're not all bad, so there's many people. There's some actors as well, some musicians, and wonderful souls that have helped us. So yeah, I've got to thank a lot of people. And of course, the main researchers we have here at the moment, yourself, Paul Sinclair, Philip Mental, Chris Evers, name but a few. There's Dr. Irina Scott, Earl Grey, Peter Robbins. There's so many. But what is lovely is being kind of like brought into a group, your group, all of our group, and as researchers and investigators, it is wonderful. It's delicious. in trying to put the pieces together, you know, trying to work things out. I've always been a person who is very open. I never say this is it, because we still don't know, but I think most of us do kind of know. We're just trying to put the dots together, just trying to make it fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is really an interesting and exciting time for, if we just use the generic name, paranormal studies within the UK, because I think there are a lot of researchers which are beginning to really develop their ideas. And I think what's also we're beginning to see is that there's a lot of cooperation. And I know I've been in contact with Paul Sinclair, I've been in contact with yourself, and we've all exchanged ideas. And certainly as a result from this, I've definitely grown as a researcher. And so, you know, I'm very grateful to yourself, because I've learned so much from yourself and through your writing and your books.
Well, that's very kind.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? Can I just ask a question, Pierre?
Mm,
Just one burning question, because you're a man who knows his stuff, and I admire your research very much. Can I ask you one question?
mm,
Do you think that the behind this travesty,
mm.
this whole master plan, this agenda, do you think this is the fallen angels behind this, Pierre?
Well, they're behind everything, aren't they? Because at the back,
Yes.
historically, they're at the backdrop of everything. So yes,
Yes.
to the answer to that. I want to go back to was it Magnus the Micro-Mod, the
Oh,
children's
yes.
character. Now, I showed my son the illustration of the dog, which your brother did. And he said to me, he said, "Oh, this looks fantastic. This looks like when books were really good at around 2000 before they became really rubbish." So in my son's eyes, he thinks that books have recently become really rubbish for children, and he thought that it looked really fun, and so you kind of imply in your book that the origin of the character went all the way back somehow, maybe some kind of shared fantasy or some kind of shared idea which you had with your brother, which goes back into childhood. Where did this character arise from?
Magnus the Micro-Mod. Yeah, he was something that had connected with us when we were kids. And even when we were kids, we were trying to build a robot dog out of cardboard and old beer cans. We didn't drink. I mean, these are someone else's beer cans, you know?
That
I'll
came
just point that
later,
out.
tried to build him.
Oh, you know, and so he kind of like, he came along as the nicest snout in many years, because we're both artists, and we started to put Magnus together in these little books. And I have the books still. They were self-published little books. We took them to a printing company, and they printed off about 130 copies. And certain copies went to a certain lady who always helped me and my brother. And also Dame Barbara Cartland had been also very instrumental and helpful, God love her. She was an amazing lady. And so the inception of Magnus, we did cartoon strips of him. We tried to get him in the local newspapers. And he basically was created for the monarch. He would be a guard dog that went on these adventures. And we were told the illustrations were amazing, which I was quite chuffed. And they followed with stories. Magnus the Micro-Mod, The Trouble with Magnus the Micro-Mod, Magnus the Micro-Mod and All the Queen's Glory, Magnus the Micro-Mod and the Time-Traveling Machine, and all this type of thing. And unfortunately, through all of this struggle and people coming in and trying to own him and wanting to make him into a computer game, which fell through for Disney, not so much as like with Disney, but that all fell through. So we found then the ugly side to it. And it was just incredible that after 20 years of rejection from publishers, it took the Rock Bottom Twins, which had been published by Pegasus Books, a completely different idea. I think my brother was so low that we'd come back from Somerset, where another family members lived, and my mum and him stopped in the pub, and he had a drink, and suddenly the idea came to him of these intrepid creators, twins, miserable, bumbling duo, Boogle and Buff Kingsmillion, that creates robots. So this robotic fantasy, this connection of having machines. I mean, I was always so amazed with Robbie the robot when I saw him in the Forbidden Planet. I wanted him. It's like I wanted that to be my best buddy. I wanted Robbie to come around with me. You know, this is incredible. I think my brother and I always had this fascination with robots, with things that were not human. And I think that says a lot. And it really riled me when the UF experiences got brought out within the media about me many years ago, and when we reported UFOs, and what would the press say? What would the media say? Oh, they're writers of children's books and they like science fiction, as though stereotyping you into a little box to make the public make you look like you're a geek.
Yeah.
Well, we are as we are. Just because you see UFOs doesn't mean to say that you can't write or can't draw or can't create music or research. It's almost as if the media want you to be a normal person. And I always say to people, I am anything but normal and proud of it. And I don't care from those people that have attacked me with my research in recent years. It doesn't bother me. But the robots were amazing, and Magnus the Micro-Mod, it's very lovely of your son, very generous of him. But in the children's books that we did, he had a bit of a nicer snout. The image that you see of him there is a more updated version. But he was our baby, he was our creation, and after many years of false starts, and we really didn't go anywhere with him. I mean, I know he came out as an ebook from a publishing company, but they didn't want to put him in as a paperback. We thought that was quite bizarre. But there we are.
I do have a question about working in cooperation with your brother.
Well, we're both artists. My brother's a much more excelled artist than I was. And generally what we would do is that we would create an idea between the two of us. Then Ronnie would write the whole thing up. Then we would get this huge A3 acid-free card. And then we would use Indian ink, and we would draw. He would draw on one illustration, I draw another one. We had some variations with Magnus, so I said, "Ronnie, you draw Magnus because my one's slightly not quite the image of him." So I did all the background stuff, and my brother did all of like the other stuff. So it's really weird, and we still have every single image of Magnus. And it's weird because we're just doing a bit of house sorting and decorating and DIY, and I pulled out a load of artwork and I thought, oh my Lord, here it all is. So Magnus is all in these huge plastic containers, color images, black and white images. I mean, there's so much of him. So, Ronnie and I both used to disagree sometimes, like, no, I don't want this. But we were told that Tove Jansson, or Tove Jansson, the creator of the Moomins, she is another heroine of mine because I loved her books, The Moomins, and I wanted to go to those worlds. She was a brilliant author. I'm sure you've heard of her, the Moomins,
Yes, yeah.
Moomin books. And I admired her book. I remembered I was about 8 when I saw one of her books on a jumble cell table at school. And I think it was all but 5p, and my mother bought it for me. And I remembered sitting there looking through this book and looking at her illustrations and thinking, wow, I want to be in that world. And of course, then when Magnus came along, our illustrations are very fine and very detailed. And I realized that on an unconscious level, I was replicating worlds similar to Tove Jansson's, not the same, but worlds of the mind where you wanted to go somewhere else. Like the houses were beautiful and you have beautiful scenery. And, there's one clip in one of the books where Magnus he's so cute, as a cyborg robot dog, sitting there underneath a lamppost, looking at a map. And behind him is this like mansion, because our main ideas were linked to rich people, mansions. And our earlier projects, very, very early projects, was called Professor Haldon Co., that was then led on with Lady Alexandra Co. and Lord Reginald the Rhino. And these were published by a very small cottage industry imprint called Writer's Own Magazine. And there's a lady, also another lady, if I may boast and say here, Eileen Pickering, who took my brother and I under her wing when we were about 16. And she trained us as writers. And she was also a Western author. She wrote a book about me and my brother under the pen name of Mark Falcon. Black Horse Westerns, a big publishing company in London. She published her books. And then she wrote one about me and my brother called Kinsella's Revenge, and I got shot in the first chapter, which was lovely. But anyway, she helped us. She inspired us to create these other worlds. And so, I think for all of us, we have, yourself included, many other people out there, you have those people that kind of like nurtured you and kind of like pushed you in the right direction, or gave you the belief, which is so important in this world. I think, someone gives you that encouragement, that belief, even that cuddle on, wiping your tears away when you're down on your chips. I think it means so much. But we have so many people to thank on our journey, science fiction authors, as well. David Saperstein was another one, the author of Cocoon. He's a good friend of ours. They made his book into a film. Ron Howard directed the film Cocoon. He's a brilliant man. He's inspired us and helped us along on our way as well. So it's really strange how all of these things started to kind of like formulate or evolve. And that's where Magnus came from. He was a product of a childhood fantasy to a dream, and to all these other extensions of what he was to become. But alas, unfortunately, he never did take off, or not yet anyway.
I know this is all very hypothetical, and sometimes I think what would have happened if I'd have just stayed with my painting and just kept life very much simpler. But do you see that if things had worked out differently, you would have been like a UK version of Tintin? Or
Well, we had high hopes for Magnus the Micro-Mod. I mean, the royal dog. I mean, we really had this dream, and it was a dream, and we still have that within our hearts. We have so much material and so many people that wanted to get their hands on him, but it's a little bit of a corrupt world, you see, and you have to be very careful, because there are a lot of dubious people who'd want to nick your ideas and take the copyright and steal him for a film deal. Which almost happened, although someone was writing a script for a film for him and tried to take him that way, but it never took off the ground. So Magnus has had a lot of bumpy rides, but he's still around, and I dare say that one day we will kind of like reinvent him and bring him forward again. We'll see. We don't know.
I'm kind of thinking about the ups and the downs of a person who's extremely creative, and I concur with that. And certainly when I speak to my brother's always talking about the curse of creativity, this idea that a creative person is almost living in this alien world where everything is focused about making money, and yet a creative person is much more about expressing themselves and understanding the world and understanding themselves. And so again, this is one of the paradoxes, isn't it, in terms of that it's almost like that people like ourselves don't fit in this world. This world just wants to control what we think. And so I think that's very difficult for creative people. But I think it does obviously inspire people, and particularly hearing your story, I resonate with your story. It's something that I've been through, and it's something that my brother's been through as well, because we're very creative people and we've had a lot of setbacks, and we've worked very hard.
Going back to what you were saying, we are all important, Pierre. It doesn't matter who you are. We've all got goals. We've all got dreams. And some people really want to push those dreams and those goals. And unfortunately, you do feel like you're a resident alien on this planet, because like yourself and your brother, me and my twin, and many other creative people, it's so frustrating when you know that you're dealing with the truth, when you're dealing with that drive, that passion to create these worlds, and then someone comes along and tries to stamp their authority on it, or tries to crush you because you are a threat to them and their work. And I, thank God, like you, have never, ever wanted to stand on anyone else's shoulders in any way or form, or my brother. We are sensitive, we're delicate creatures. We love our worlds. We love researching. So it's kind of like a strange mixture, really. I'm like you, very much interested in ufology and give my life to the research of that, to exploring the afterlife, the soul, consciousness, which is really an area I'm fascinated about, and dealing with these other creations, children's creations. Doesn't put you in good light where the media are concerned, but we know what the media are about. We know what they try to do. And, I think these present times just says everything with regards to that.
I think also reading Guardians of the Dead, what I actually found about the book is that it's extremely humorous. I mean, I found myself chuckling through it all the time. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, But you've got some great chapters in there. There's a chapter about where you talk about people who are disbelieving, or people who are just incredibly rude or insensitive. And I kind of recognize that myself in terms of my own research, because obviously sometimes, people do obviously respond mainly positively, but sometimes people can be quite negative, and it can become quite disheartening. So I found those chapters very interesting. As a psychic, and when you're trying to do readings and you're trying to be diplomatic, but obviously somebody's just being completely rude or
Oh
insensitive,
yeah.
how do you deal
Oh,
with that?
I think I used to deal with it quite roughly, to be honest with you. But I've learned to just cut off now. I mean, I had one particular person I was doing a Skype reading for, and this particular person wanted to show me that she lived in grand opulence and very OKR, and it treating me like a toy thing. And I only bring evidence through. I only say to the person, I just need a yes or no. I never feed. And I could be starting the reading by saying, I've got and she was only young, your father is here, passed with congenital heart defect, and your mother also here, passed with whatever. And when you get someone who you think, my goodness me, you're bringing all this evidence through, and it's not like you're scoring points, you want a bit of ego. It's like there's no reaction. And I can feel, I can sense from the individual what's coming back from them. And I think we pick up on people's energies a lot. I deal with them in a diplomatic fashion, but this one particular person, I just thought, I'm not dealing with this. I can't deal with this negativity. So if you don't want to believe, that's fine. I don't force anyone to believe anything. I just ask for you to come with an open mind and be honest with me, be black and white with me. And this was what I led up to, because I won the mediumship award of 2008 in Portsmouth, which was a nerve-wracking experience. The Spiritual National Union were there, and Tony Stockwell was there, and the press was there. And I will never put myself through that ever again in my life. It was the most, I reckon I nearly had a heart attack, because you've got all these people and you're being judged and examined through evidence. But I never wanted to take it any further. They wanted me to go and demonstrate and perform all around the country, and I didn't want to do that, because I just wanted to work the way I want to work. You'll get negative people. I've had one person put their face in my face and say it's a load of old whatever. And I say, well, yes, you're absolutely right then. And he looks stunned. And I said, if that's your belief, then I'm not going to counteract that at all. Why would I want to change your opinion? Just wait until you get there, and then you'll find out, won't you? And I also had one lady who was having a go at me. And I said, well, don't you worry, madam, don't you worry. We'll all get there. We'll all make it eventually. She still doesn't know what I was talking about. I've had a few difficult situations, challenging situations. I always feel it, because Pierre, I'm sure you would have had this before. When you're a kid and an adult's having a go at you or shouting at you, do you remember your stomach dropping?
Yes, all the time.
Yeah, I still get that sometimes with some people. It's like, it's a feeling, and I just think, well, go for the grace of God, wherever you're going, just go. It doesn't matter. But I don't get many of them. I've had a few of them over my time. I've been doing clairvoyance for about, it must be some years now. I think 28 when it started, my late 20s when it all really started activating. But I remember I was doing one reading for one lady in the sitting room, and this made me laugh. I sat there and she sat opposite me. And I said, she was only young. And I said, I've got your father here. Your dad's passed over. She said, yes. I said, I said, I covered my, I said, I can't see anything. I said to her, could you please tell me why I can't see anything at all? And I was fussing. I said, I can't see nothing. And she reached over. She touched me. She said, it's okay, my darling. My father was blind. And I will always remember different ways that those on the other side. And I thought, wow, how amazing was that? I was like more amazed myself than she was. It was like, learning, applying the understanding of this whole thing of called discarnate communication, which is very bizarre, but you kind of like get used to it. We're still learning, we're still developing every day of the week. I'm no expert. But it is interesting to see how they work from their end, and they have a wicked sense of humor from their side. It's not like, I read for one lady, a real lady, whoever, and her husband came through, and she thought they were still walking around like zombies on the other side. I said, it's not like that. I said, just take a look out the window. That's where the zombies. So I've had some really funny episodes and some very horrible situations. And one particular man, got really abusive with me because I wouldn't tell him if he'd be with a woman that he loved. And I said, well, I can't do that. I can't perform magic. I don't have that power. I'm just a conduit, like your mobile phone. I just interpret information coming from a different wavelength. And there people that have stayed. I'm not a magician. I can't bring you the lady of your dreams. He didn't like that.
I mean, I guess this is a very common response, isn't it? That there are often people who, I guess you attract a lot of people who are suffering, they've either had a separation or they're mourning, or again, people who have had their hearts broken, and again, they want that reassurance. I would imagine that your job it's almost like being a counsellor, isn't it, at some level?
Yes, I think that it's very important on a serious level, and I mean really professional level, that I deal only with evidence, and to connect the person with either their son, their daughter, the mother, father, uncle, brother, whoever. I think it's important, and understanding the pain that they're going through and leading up to the loss of their loved one as well, which is very important. I do deal also with a lot of people who are going through emotional instability or mental problems. I do state to them categorically that I am not a counsellor. I'm not a qualified counsellor. But sometimes it is a bit like counseling, because you're actually trying to heal the person who's going through pain. And it is awful. I mean, we have our laughter and we also have our serious bits. The only thing that really goads me more than anything is people that come and they're interested in a reading about their loved ones who've crossed over. They're only interested in whether or not they'll be with so-and-so. And I always say to them, well, you're the author of your destiny. You map your life chart. All that's happening is that those on the other side sometimes give us a little bit of foresight of where you're going. They cannot grant your wish. And we may see some things that will happen, a lot of things we don't. And this comes back to prophecy, because I was dead against it. And the night before 9/11 occurred, I did feel 3 blasts that I will never forget. I didn't see buildings collapsing. I saw no one falling. I saw none of that. It was 3 blasts in the solar plexus, the region of the gut. And it was almost as if every atom in my body was scattering on 3 occasions. The next day I walk into work. My boss is in the canteen. He's watching what I thought was a film of a plane going into a building, until I found out that 9/11 had occurred and 3 buildings had been struck. And it took many years later to work out the atom, the part about the atoms. And another researcher, Andrew Johnson, knows Dr. Judy Wood, who wrote Where Did the Towers Go? She's a scientist, and she wrote this book all about the effects of the towers collapsing and what. She's a scientist. She analyzed this, and it means the atomic structure seemed to have been disabled within the buildings. And this obviously was brought from spirit to me on the day before, the night that it happened, where I felt all my atoms exploding and scattering away. And of course, as we understand, the people were taking their clothes off at the buildings because they were cooking from the inside out. And of course, once again, we have another situation where the system will try to make you believe that it was the fuel from the aircrafts, which was impossible. So, it's really bizarre and amazing. Sometimes messages aren't really understood until much later,
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Dr. Judy Wood's research, I've read the book and it's really amazing. And
yes.
again, this idea of electromagnetic weapons and microwave weapons. So, yeah, I definitely recommend the audience to check that book out, because that gives a completely different perspective to 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's interesting about precognition. I've had a couple of episodes myself. I had one episode where I saw the tidal wave. My wife's Japanese, and I saw the tidal wave coming in, and I said to Mary, something horrible is going to happen, and it's going to be so significant, it's going to change the coastline of Japan. Now, it didn't change the coastline of Japan, but what I saw was very significant, that it gave me that impression. And the second one that I had was another earthquake with a tidal wave, and I was sleeping and I woke up. Basically, I had this big dream about where I was hit by this wave, and that I was in all this dirty water being washed around, drowning. and I sat straight up, bolt right in bed. And I just said, I've been hit by a wave. I've been hit by a wave. And then I went downstairs. I think it was Boxing Day, or it was around Christmas time. And I think it was Thailand, if I remember correctly. And then it was on the news, all of this. And I was seeing all of the images. And my wife was saying, wow, that's amazing. That's very coincidental.
Wow.
And
Yes.
yeah, but I think that most people have these types of insights. I've got a
Oh,
feeling
yes.
that a lot of people have paranormal experiences, and I think it's quite normal, but a lot of people just will discount it. And I find that a lot with my rational friends. It's like, wow, that's a very interesting experience. You interpret that as a dream, and yet that is a very, very strange dream. But I do think that we all have this potential insight, this ability. I think it's tuning into the field, like what we were talking about earlier, that we can
Yes.
tune into the thought field. And because this also exists outside of time, then we are able to tune into this any given time. And so I think
Yes.
that that's very interesting.
If there is intent by many minds, then that might build as a solid foundation and solidify into what we call the future. Taking an example of 9/11, for instance, there appears to be many minds orchestrating and planning this, which would have solidified into the field of intent, causing it to manifest eventually. And I think a lot of people, a lot of sensitive people, tapped into this future knowing, which was there already, into this field of intent, because everything for the future seems to be here now. If there's an intention or it's strong enough, it might impress itself within the field of consciousness so strong that it's felt by others. Many people, when they think and feel things, their fantasies in the mind, they precipitate within the field because they don't have any strong substance. But if the intent is strong enough and really pushed forward, then I believe that other people, or all of us, we're all psychic to a degree, are able to tune into that, or that comes into our wavelength if we're on that same level of understanding. So I believe that there is going to be a method in the future of being able to predict certain events, or at least looking into a timeline. Minority Report was the science fiction film that was created, and I was fascinated with that. And it kind of like, I was always curious about the future. How is the future told? How can we see the future? I had a hard time with it until 9/11 happened, and it kind of like, after many years later, I thought about it, and I thought, well, that actually makes sense now. Even though it took a long time for me to wake up to the realization that prophecy can fail, and sometimes it can be achieved with great results. It depends whether or not the intent within the field of conscious awareness is strong enough from the recipient. So that's my understanding of the future. There must be some type of life mapping that occurs, that rolls out, rather like a computer game. When you're in a computer game, it's all made for you, but we have free will to go left or right. Unfortunately, in this life, we can't restart the game again. Unlike a computer game, we can start back where we began.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about potentiality. I think the future is potentiality, but there
Oh,
are
yes.
obviously certain potentialities which are given substance or are more likely to occur. And
Correct.
I think it's very interesting in terms of predictive programming as well. And this goes into the occult in terms of how often, if the Illuminati want to materialize something into physical reality, then they start to do this very early through films and through the media, and they put in certain
Yes.
symbols or talismans, which then
Yes.
reinforces that message. And again, really what they're trying to do is they're trying to change the universe, and they're trying to change the universe through mind control, because mind control is really all about changing the universe, because literally we make the world with our thoughts, and there is that correspondence. So this is why they're absolutely obsessed with controlling what we think, because they're obsessed about controlling the universe and the physical and
Yes.
external world, and that then has repercussions at a spiritual and at a subtle level. So I think that that was very interesting. It's very interesting that you said that you were, shall we say, when you were working as a psychic, that to begin with you were very reluctant about prophecy. Did you just feel
Yes.
that that was frivolous, or that was something that maybe shouldn't be tampered with, or was that taboo? How?
I was more concerned with the fact that when you're reading for people and you're bringing through um, evidence, I was going to say incredible evidence, And then you're dealing with prophecy. I felt uncomfortable. I kept thinking, well, what if I'm wrong? What am I seeing? What does this mean? But I also feel that there's a fear that I didn't want to interfere with that future, with the person's future. But I also understood now, not just through your work, through, the occult, as it were, which I'm very fascinated with as well, very intrigued with. But there are other minds. I remembered meeting one man, a businessman. He turned up in a Jaguar, I believe, came to see me. And he seemed very sad. And I believe his father came through. If I remember correctly, his father. There's lots of evidence I can't remember now because this is going back years, but I remembered what happened afterwards because I said to him, "Sir, may I ask a question of you, please?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Why do you look so sad?" And then he opened up to me and told me that he had been one of these people who'd gone to the Skull experiment up in Norfolk, and he had been witness to a light being, that was, I can't remember how many years ahead in time this was, but he had seen it. And this being had touched his hand and informed him that this is what we were to become in X amount of time. I think it was millions of years. I can't remember, so don't quote me on the year bit. And he just, because his life was all money and materialism, he'd seen something that completely shattered his reality. And he was almost suicidal. So I spent another half an hour trying to coax him out, telling him that, I'd seen some strange things and it's amazing, it's incredible. Don't put yourself down. But there are other forces, there are other negative forces that operate, and I have felt them as well. Psychic attack is one of them. People say, oh, what a load of rubbish. Well, they said that about remote viewing, the extension of human consciousness that can travel beyond the confines of the physical world. And that was made very much evident where Ingo Swann, orchestrated the remote viewing program in the United States back in the 80s. And all this type of thing. And there's the system telling us one thing, and they're really doing the other. So, and then we find out there are darker forces, there are darker energies. And I'm sure that I've had a few experiences with them on occasions.
Do you think in terms of psychic attack that it's other magicians or psychic people? Are we talking about discarnate entities, or can it be a combination?
Well, that's a very tough question. I did have the feeling once when I was writing a particular book with another author on Rendlesham that I saw a military guy in the hall, out in the hall, because I used to write in the kitchen, a nice peaceful place. And I saw this guy in uniform running towards me, and he ran so quickly in front of me that he disappeared that I almost fell off the chair. And I did have a feeling that, I don't know, was that remote viewing? I couldn't tell you. Other times there have been, and I'm absolutely convinced, darker forces have tried to knock me off my pedestal or try and bring me down, or I don't know. They have happened. But I think because we're strong and that we're light and that we're energy and that we carry truth within our hearts, that we are protected anyway. But it doesn't stop them from coming through. I think there's a combination. I believe that some people, I say humans, are in coalition with these darker forces. And I agree, Pierre, with what you say. Most definitely, they succumb to the energies of these forces, and they perform these rituals in order to give more power, more energy to them to come into this matrix. We're hearing a lot of stories, negative stories, dark stories about fear and how these entities feed from fear and control. And so I definitely believe that they are here and that they're around us. But they tend to stay away from good people because they know that we are not a force not to be reckoned with. But they'll come in sometimes, I think, to try and knock you off your pedals.
I want to just mention a little anecdote which occurred to me. Basically, I went to see another researcher who's fairly prominent within the research community. He makes films and he collects magical items. And we were there for a weekend. It was a few individuals who went on this holiday together. Now, I stayed later for an extra day, and so I was there by myself. And during the evening, this dark cloud came and it attacked me. It tried to kill me, actually, this black cloud, tried to
Oh.
suffocate me. So I swore at it. I said, "Get the F off me." And it went straight to the corner of the room. And instantly, I could sense that it was scared of me. I could sense that it was almost like that it recognized that I could destroy it very easily. And I went to the toilet, and the lamp was on because I'd fallen asleep. And I came back and the lamp was on. And I sat on my bed and it was still there in the corner of the room. And I was like, well, what am I going to do with this thing now? What do I do with it? Do I literally grab hold of it and put it outside, or do I go back to sleep? You know, this kind of thing had never happened before. And I was sitting there for 10 minutes watching it, thinking about, well, what do I do? And then I thought, well, you know what? This thing is scared of me, so I'm just going to go back to sleep. And I went back to sleep, and that was that. But again, I think that there are, maybe this was some type of protection. I don't really know. But I think that you are clearly right, that there is good forces and evil forces. And I think that sometimes in this society where there's this relative morality or moralism, there's a reluctance to say that something is downright evil or something is really, really good. But I think sometimes when we reduce our language, then we reduce the subtlety and we reduce the expression. And I think sometimes it is really just important to label something as it is, you know, in that sometimes there is good and there is bad. And from what we know studying the occult, the bad can become good and the good can become corrupted. And so there is this flux within energy, and that flux is obviously a point of view or a point of attention. So I think that that's interesting what you was talking about. And again, this black cloud, which in the traditions would be a type of jinn, I guess. Shedim would be a type of jinn, Sauda,
Yeah.
which is black. So yeah, this kind of that would be the Arabic word, but in English it would be a type of shade, I guess, where you'd get the etymology for shadow. So yeah, that was an experience which occurred.
Oh, yes. And you know, I remembered as kids, me and my brother walking, um, following behind our mother, and there was this thing swinging on the top of the trees, and it looked like a big bear, but had the most grotesque face, just swinging backwards and forwards, looking at us both. And my brother and I remembered it vividly. We were always afraid of gnomes or you know, like faces of gnomes. It scared the hell out of us. And there's a lot of things that paranormal experiences that happened to both of us in our early years. I think not so much after my teenage years. In 1989 I had the abduction, and of course when we were 13 with our grandmother with a silver orb. But more so later, and you know, trying to put these together, trying to understand them, is what I've been doing. And then of course, as we joked earlier, while I'm doing all of this research, then finding out that this psychic part had activated. And I think it activated through me going through a very bad time, through losing people. And I think I was broken inside, and I think something opened. Even though I felt broken, something had opened. And I think I wanted to find out what reality meant. So like you, I've got my areas in Genesis, of creation, of God, of the spirit world, of UFOs, of the occult, of the fallen angels, which also fascinate us. You know, we're allowed to be fascinated. We have to look into certain areas of investigations to find out why things are as they are. But certainly with your experience, you know, I have felt on a few occasions that there's been, and it doesn't just have to come from, you know, other entities, it can come from people as well. There's been a few people that I've been wary of, and on a few occasions thought, are you human? You know, and people laugh, but not in a detrimental way. They don't laugh in a detrimental way, but because they know that, like you, we're hopefully on the ball, and we don't mess around with nonsense. But there have been a few people who I have wondered whether or not are they people.
I'm with you on that. I think that they are definitely walking amongst us, and
Oh yes.
they've been here for thousands of years, and they've been a part of what we would describe as our culture, as our language. And so then I think you are legitimate to ask that type of question. And I think because of your experiences and because you have gone public, then obviously they are interested in you. To me, that would make complete sense. And I think it's the same with me as well. It's like I
Yeah.
didn't really have too many experiences as a child. I can remember when I was a child, I didn't go into a certain part of a garden, and when I was at my grandmother's, because I thought that the fairies lived there and that I'd get stolen away.
Lovely.
I don't exactly know why, but when I got a bit older, when I was about 15, I figured out, well, the aliens must be telepathic. And so I'll try and make telepathic contact with them. And so I was trying to meditate and make contact with aliens when I was about 15. Nothing kind of happened for about 20 years. And it's basically when I decided to write my first book, The Murder of Reality.
Oh,
When
yes.
I made that decision to write that book, then really things started to happen. I started to see beings of light. I started to see shadow beings. I actually had a conversation with a group of shadow beings. I was in a trance and I was writing down what they were saying. And that was
Mm.
interesting. What I found was interesting is that they talk in poetry as well. So they were, it was reciting poetry to me.
Well, we tend to put things in boxes in this world. Not you or I or many other researchers, but other people, they tend to categorize things and say, well, this isn't possible. For instance, many years ago, I never used to believe in channeling. Now I totally understand it because the system that we serve, the system that we are brought into, negates these subject matters until you start looking into them. And we find that the human brain is the modulator for consciousness in this realm. And consciousness, I believe, is connected to the field of all that is. And that through our programming here, this is why most people can't see the wood for the trees, because they negate that belief or that structured thinking and allowing these alternative dimensions to come into their reality. For instance, how is it that 3 people are in the presence of UFOs and only 2 of them can see them? Now that's interesting. And that says a lot more about consciousness and how these other realities are able to affix to the individual, albeit on a temporary basis.
I've got an idea about that as well. I've got a feeling that in some of those cases, I'm not saying all of these cases, is that you've got one person who is sensitive to what's being seen and the other individual is touching that other individual, which then gives them the sight to actually see what they're seeing. I've
Mm-hmm.
uncovered a number of cases which I'm writing about currently in my book, Invisible Kingdom.
Wonderful.
But again, that this goes back into ancient fairy lore as well and
Yes. Oh,
folklore.
yes.
So you had people who had second sight. And I think what's very interesting when you look in the 1700s and you were looking at the clairvoyants in the 1700s, those who had second sight were not only just seeing spirits of the deceased and the dead, which they saw and which was documented, but they were also seeing the fairies. And the fairy world and the world of the fae and the spirit world were one and the same thing. And I think that in itself is interesting. But again, these people or these individuals with second sight, through touch, they could transfer the ability to see. And so, but again, I think that also when you look at perception and memory, I think this is very interesting as well. So in some ufological cases or fairy cases or even angel cases as well, 2 individuals will see what is ostensibly on the surface the same thing, but then when you look at the details and you look at the final level, it's almost like that the vision or sight has been modulated for that individual person's consciousness. So if you wasn't paying attention, you would probably think that they were looking at the same thing, but actually the way in which it manifested to their consciousness is manifesting in a way which is different. And it's almost like it's designing itself for the individual mind.
Yes, and as we've stated, this is an individual journey. All of us are trying to fit it in the same box, but I think it operates on an individual awareness, a soul level that is unique to you within your soul signature. So this is why I think we're having a problem with many of these subject matters like ufology and spiritualism and all these other types of things. We're all trying to squeeze it into the same box. Always reminds me of that advert, the old one where they did put chocolate in boxes, the Maltesers, where they closed the lid. They couldn't quite close it because there were too many Maltesers in the box. Always reminds me of that. And I think that, on an individual basis, it is fascinating how this reality morphs itself to the individual on a personal level. And perhaps it knows that if it's not if it's not too bright, that if it continues on this voyage of being the same thing, that people would know where it came from, know what it is, what they are. I think that's why it changes so much. The fairies, the fae, and the goblins of the past, all these things are real, and I believe that they are dimensions within themselves. Neil Geddes Ward, another good friend of ours, he does a lot of research into the fairy folk, and of course he's encountered a lot of people that you would never believe would have had these experiences with them. So it is incredible and it's fascinating, but trying to put it all together is quite something.
Yeah, I'm very interested in certainly the, shall we say, the unification, the ufology, fairy law, and angelology. And I'm actually convinced that we're dealing here with the same phenomenon. And also when you're dealing with the jinn as well, that there is this overlap, and it's something which is really, really interesting. And again, how these beings can materialize or take on a persona and adapt that persona for the particular consciousness
Yes,
and the culture.
yes.
And again, we're dealing here with some kind of deception, and so it's almost trying to remain unnameable. It's almost trying to remain just outside of our reach.
Yes, and it's very frustrating, especially the last UFO experience that we had, my twin brother and I had, was on the 9th of April 2016 here in Bedford at 11:15 at night, and I will never forget it. And sometimes you have to pinch yourself because it was filmed, thank goodness, for my niece. It's a long story that I won't go into here, but it is in the new UFO book that's coming out in January. But when you're having them hovering over you in a triangular formation, and you are standing there with your twin brother, observing them, amazed, and there is no sound. It's almost as if time has stopped. Time didn't stop, but it felt like it had. There was no one around. And then you go into the world and you have someone saying to you what they believe that you saw, even though they weren't there. And I would say to that person that if you had been there, I can guarantee that you would have either fainted or run a mile, because these people have got it all worked out. But the frustrating part is why? Why do we have these experiences that leave us with more questions than answers? I said to Ronnie, why have they presented themselves in the way that they did and did the maneuvers they did? There was no contact at all, mentally or anything like that. So you keep chasing, it's like chasing shadows. But I think there must be a deeper reason within the psyche, and something we may not be privy to while we're here on Earth. You see, we always think that everything's got to be done here, but we've got to understand that from the soul perspective, there obviously seems to be a bigger, greater journey for us beyond this realm.
Yeah, no, I do agree. And I kind of look at the spiritual and the physical world. There's two ways of looking at it. I see that the spiritual world is the big infinity and the physical world is a small infinity.
Ah, yes, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Because the spirit world is all that there is of every single idea, and the physical world is how that is manifested. And you're dealing, in a sense, with eternity on both sides, but you're dealing with the big eternity and the small eternity.
Yes, that's right. And we're told that on the other side, that everything is there. My recollection of that has never left me. It is more real. It's the only way I can explain it. I mean, I remember I had experience at work. Last year I was in a training room and I dealt with a member of staff. They'd left the office and it was a beautiful afternoon. And I looked out upon the blue sky because where I was about 5 floors above the ground. And all of a sudden I found myself standing within these, and I don't know why rocks or stones I've always been drawn to them. And I think I know why. And I'm standing in this beautiful mountainous area that seems to have a path running through it. That's why I was always drawn to Tatooine in Star Wars when I was a kid. It's like, I recognize that place. I don't know why. But I'm standing there and there are these hooded people with me, a group of them. Didn't see their faces. They were humanoid. They were wearing these hoods, these robes. And I was walking with them. And I remembered thinking, hang on a minute. I'm supposed to be at work in the office and I'm here. And the feeling was like detachment, complete freedom. It was like Christmas Day. It was like, I didn't have any worries. It's like, what am I worried about? It was just such a wheeling, and yet it was so visual. And I was there. I was actually standing there with these people. And the shock of thinking, well, have I died? Am I here? Oh, that's great. But then I found myself back in the room at my desk, and I remembered I dropped the pencil I was holding. I got up and I went to go and find a young lass that, but you know, we're on the same par, me and her. She understands. There's some people, you know, who you can't go to. I could trust me on that one. And I cried. I told her, my God, I've just. And she said, I said, I can't believe it. I said, I was sitting in the train, and then I'm here. So I think when these things happen to us, I think when part of the mind has been opened. And remember, these are subject matters that I completely detested when I was younger, or didn't understand. By location, the soul being in two places at the same time, I never would have believed it. And if someone tells me now, I have an appreciation of that because I've had an experience. And it doesn't mean that I've had every experience going. I've had several experiences which have told me that consciousness is not just primarily fixed in one matrix. It's obviously linked into other areas. These people are like saying to me, it's okay, it's fine. What's the problem? The road ahead was straight. I didn't see any buildings. It was just this long, long, long path that went on forever, like rocky path. It wasn't like a path that we know, but it was all rocks laid out like a path with mountains in the distance. And I felt so at home. So, you know, you have these experiences, and it tells you that there is more to us than just being on earth, as it were. And this also led into the theoretical aspects of my work going back, that was published in 1996, and then in the future publications of the books with regards to timelessness and the greys and cloning, and them taking us outside of our filled frequency of awareness and being matched by their connection link. For instance, when we die, when the soul is no longer part of the physical realm, your soul will be matched by the new frequency, which means you can interact with it, because people have got this big hang up thinking, oh, you know, it's all a wispy, airy, fairy place. But when we get there, we'll find that it's very solid, although on a conscious level, or a super conscious level rather, we can do a lot more there than we can in this very limited matrix that we're locked into.
To add a comment to that, and I think that that's very important in terms of your resonance and in terms of how you die and how that interconnects with the spirit realm. I know that when I was on an aeroplane, when we were flying to Japan, the aeroplane fell out of the sky, and it fell several thousand feet, and everyone on the plane literally thought that we were all going to die. And I remember holding my wife's hand and just saying over and over in my mind, love, 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 love. And there was an instinctive knowingness almost that it was very important that the state of mind, how you die, and that was very instinctual. So
gosh, what an experience. Good Lord.
yeah, so I don't like flying much now, so I try not to fly. Before that, I really did like flying, but now it's it's taken on a slightly different color. But then again, that's just a matter of perception, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, I don't like flying. I've flown like everyone else, but it doesn't really appeal to me. Most people love it. I just hold on to the chairs until my knuckles go white.
Yeah, that's pretty much me as well. Yeah.
In a tin can, you know. Here we go.
It's like, if God wanted us to fly, he'd have given us wings.
Get me to the other side quick.
I like the Star Trek idea, Mark.
Oh yes, yeah. I love Beam Me Up,
Anyway,
Scotty. Yeah. Yeah, and my friend, incidentally, when he died, he told me that he would do it like they do on Star Trek, because he loves Star Trek. And it's funny you should mention that, because that's in the book. And of course, when I saw him, he became more this light, like he was beaming up. It wasn't exactly like they beam up on Star Trek. All the lights were flashing like he was dissolving. And of course, then I realized that I was so happy. I was very elated, and I got very emotional, because he proved to me that, you know, it takes a lot to get through this hard head of mine. like yourself, as a researcher, an author, an investigator, and you're going into these different subject matters. And when you've had the experiences that you have, it sometimes helps us have an appreciation of what people are talking about or what they're going through. Because if you don't have those experiences, it's hard for you to measure them because you haven't had the experience. But it is amazing. It's fascinating. I think, the afterlife is a reality. I know that. I met my grandfather after he died, or he rather brought me to the other side, but I suspect that it wasn't the whole other side when I saw him. He obviously took me to a halfway house between here and their realm. And I had the feeling that was very much the case. One of the things we did find, we did discover through our research, is that when you go to the other side, there's no sun. And I questioned this on several experiences that I had where it was all bright, but there was no sun. And I spoke to Neil Geddes Ward about this, and other people have reported this who have crossed over, where they don't see a sun yet it's all light. It's incredible, and it's very visual and very real. But then, of course, what happens, you see, is that in this world, we have the day, we get up in the morning, and we go round in this cycle, this wheel of never-ending wheel of like getting up, getting yourself invented, having breakfast, getting the family sorted or yourself sorted, going out, doing your things, getting your things done, and we come full circle again. And when we get to the end of the day, it's almost like, well, I've done this and I've done that, I've completed this. But then we wake up and it's just this cycle. On the other side, there is no cycle. Everything is just amazingly in that moment of eternity. And the people, they ask, well, I don't understand that. And I said, well, you won't, because you're in a human body, you're on earth. That's a very earthly thought. I keep going back to that again.
Do you think you have a better understanding of this because you had a near-death experience when you was younger, or is that just through training as a medium?
I don't know, Pierre. I think that all of us are unique. I think all of us have this journey called life. And I think this journey, our own journey, our personal journey, may involve variables that are meant to happen for us to research and look into certain areas. I never would have dreamed when I was younger that I would be mixing with esteemed minds, writing books, doing research, looking into the elements of the paranormal, like yourself. But then going back into the past now, it kind of like makes
Well, it
sense
makes
because
sense, doesn't it?
yes,
Every trip up that you make along life is actually leading to a greater plan.
yes,
And so
that's right.
even though you can't see this at the time, it's almost pushing you down. I won't use the word predefined path. I think but it's pushing you towards a strong tendency. It's almost like a magnet.
Yes, yeah. Well, I always joke with my brother and I say, at the end of the day, I said, what we will have is probably still a blank page, but at least we tried. We gave it the best shot we could.
No, I completely agree with that. Yeah. No, I've very much surprised myself, and I think I wouldn't have seen what I'm doing, but it makes complete sense. It's this paradox. So if I was looking at the child and I thought to myself, well, I'd be writing books and people would be interested in my work, it's like I wouldn't be able to see that. But now looking back with hindsight, it kind of all makes sense. It all fits into place. And it almost seems like that's exactly how it should have been. I almost feel like that it's almost like that I've gone through every single hoop that I should have. Maybe some people don't do that in life, that they miss a turning in life. But I think I've taken all of the correct turnings, even the turnings which were unexpected. And I thought, oh no, this is a complete disaster. It's not working out how I want it to work out. In actual fact, everything did actually work out how it was supposed to.
Yeah, I suppose it's like a puzzle when you've got all the pieces that's scattered and you start putting the pieces together, and then you remember, you think, well, I put that piece together first before this next piece. Life is very complex, and I think going back again very quickly to the life mapping must be an intricate process that, would just literally boggle our human mind here. But certainly going back into my life as you go back into your life, I mean, I never would have believed that I would be reading books that you had written, or indeed books that are talking about, the occult. and the angels, the angel law, and all that type of thing. The fallen angels and all this thing. I just think it's amazing, and now I can put the pieces together. And one of those was a teacher that I remembered, a very kind teacher, Mr. Jones, many years ago. And he used to smoke a pipe, you see, because teachers could, they could go into the common room and have a smoke or whatever. And he was very.
When we were kids, I think.
Oh yes, they were the good old days. The good old days. There was something warming about the smell of pipe smoke. But anyway, Mr. Jones, I remembered another wonderful, beautiful lady called Miss Horton that my brother and I loved very much, and she got Mr. Jones to lend us his entire encyclopedia of unexplained magazines. We were told before we went on our summer holidays that make sure that you look after these magazines, because Mr. Jones is lending them to you and wants you to look after them. And we did. And I'll tell you what, we took those magazines to our grandparents' house, our grandma and granddad. They lived in a huge house in Feltham in Middlesex. And we'd all pore over them. And it's like that, then you see, may have been the guiding hand to lead us.
Yeah, they were great. They were. I remember them. They were black, weren't they? They were.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right.
No,
yes.
I had a massive collection of them, and they were amazing. They had everything in, from UFOs to Bigfoot to ghosts.
I mean, the thing that Ronnie and I used to be bought was the Doctor Who magazines.
The Doctor Who. I remember the Doctor Who.
Yeah, Doctor Who. We had that, but these are the magazines that we didn't have. Because he had the entire set, and I remember us gloating over all the artist illustrations of the monsters and the ghosts and the UFOs, and we were absolutely made.
Yeah, I was very interested in fantasy artists like Boris Vigelio and.
Oh yeah. Oh well, shall I tell you something? May I boast a little bit here? Well, he and his wife endorsed one of our children's book. It was one of the Rock Bottom Twins children's books. They were Boris Vigelio and Julie Bell, and they endorsed. I think it was the Rock Bottom Twins, the Nakabati Mission, and they're from Philadelphia. And they're the world's top science fiction fantasy artists. It's a strange story how we got connected with them, but they're lovely people. Yeah, I thought I'd just boast there a little bit. Bit proud there, very proud.
Yeah, I mean, I was very interested in doing figurative painting, so I used to. In the old days, I would do figurative painting, and I started copying a lot of pre-Raphaelite works and Renoir, and then went into kind of technical painting.
Wow.
And I do kind of wonder what type of artist I would be now. I've kind of got a feeling that I'd have probably gone into symbolism, but mixed with realism, maybe some kind of a hyper-realism with symbolism. But it's difficult to know, because I kind of explored everything from a little bit of photographic realism, symbolism, surrealism. I mean, I liked artists such as David Hockney, but I also liked artists like Salvador Dali. I mean, he was a genius because he really did see ahead into the future. And I know a lot of my listeners might deride what I say when I say that I'm not a great fan of Picasso. I think the main player was Salvador Dali. And if you look at all of the modern artwork now within advertising, and you look at computer artwork in particular, and that was a complete game changer. That was just like the difference between photography and painting, and how that influenced 19th century and 20th century art. But also much earlier, within the Renaissance, they were using photographic techniques, both within Germany and also within Italy as well. But yeah, I mean, Salvador Dali is an amazing artist. He anticipated so much what is occurring now.
You're a brilliant artist as well. Your art in your books is fantastic.
Yeah, well, I illustrated the books, but again, you understand this as a creator, is that when you write in a book, you also want it to have a personal meaning, and doing your illustrations, or having your brother or somebody who's very close to you, who you resonate with, makes that book so much more personal. It makes it so much more creative. And so I kind of, certainly in the Invisible Kingdom, I will be illustrating that book as well, just because I just
looking forward to reading that.
Yeah, I just want to be a part of that process. So I think we've covered lots of different areas. If there is anything that you want to finish on, or if there's anything that you want to talk about, or if you want to talk about your different books or advertise your work, or where you can find your work, please feel free.
Thank you. Well, my other books were published by different publishers, but I don't. They're very hard to get now because, as you know, with publishers, they only print certain runs of them. You know, I don't know, probably about 3,000 or 4,000 copies. But my other book, A Passage to Eternity: The Enigma of the Dead, UFOs, and Aliens, is available on Amazon. Because to cut a long story short, my brother and I were publisherless. So because they both our publishers died. Editor at Pegasus Books, and John Day from Cape of Ben, who was a lovely man. I also have Guardians of the Dead, which we've been talking about. That's just come out, and that was endorsed by Linda Dearsley, who wrote the books on Doris Stokes, the famous medium back in the 80s. And I also have a new UFO book coming out from Philip Mental's Flying Disc Press, called You, the Public Deceived, the Grand UFO Deception. And that will be released on the 1st of January of 2021. And I am working now on a new book called Visitors from the Void, which deals specifically with the concept of consciousness and how these other alternative forces are able to interact into our matrix, bring themselves into our reality temporarily, and exploring the greys as well, which I'm very fascinated in, and which you also, Pierre, have helped me with. Only the one major event that happened in 1989 with the Noddy type character and the other stuff that happened, but you put a piece together that's fascinated me, and with regards to my brother and the Noddy character, you know, what he was doing and what my brother had done earlier. Now that fascinates me. So I'm working on that new book, Visitors from the Void, and I've got some other projects outlined as well. I just want to tell your listeners, I just want to say basically for those people to, you know, don't take my word for it. Just go out and research, do your own research, look for yourself to find your truths. Let no one change your belief systems. That's very dangerous. But having an open mind is important. And realizing that we are more than flesh and blood entities with a sell-by date. There are alternative dimensions of awareness. You know, look around you and you'll see that the system in which we serve still has the upper hand in lying to us and making us believe in these lies. Exactly. So I knew, and I knew I wasn't lying. I knew that they were lying and I wasn't lying about UFOs or psychic phenomena.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I mean, I've read You, the Public Deceived. It's a fantastic book. I also read your other book as well with the reptilian entity on.
A Passage Through Eternity.
A Passage Through Eternity, yes. And again, that was a fantastic book. And I think what's interesting is that certainly with the Guardians of the Dead, which I'm reading at the moment, is that they're quite distinct. So in the other two books, you describe your experiences with this otherness and aliens, flying saucers, entities, however you want to describe that. And then with the Guardians of the Dead, it's much more dealing with the psychic component, you as a medium, speaking to dead people. And again, the proof as well. You know, I was kind of like really shocked and amused simultaneously when you did a reading for a person and told them that their relative had been eaten by a shark. And so,
oh my good Lord, I will never forget it.
so the information is actually really specific. And so,
good Lord.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm in awe of your work, and I think it's really fantastic. And I think that you're beginning to draw together all these different strands that all of us as authors, writers, researchers really need to pay attention to. And so, you know, I just want to thank you for your work and for your continued effort. And as a researcher myself, I just want to say that I do respect your work. And so please keep on writing the books, because I'm very happy to read the books, and I learned so much from reading your books.
Oh, and you know, the compliment is repaid, sir, because as a brilliant author and researcher yourself, I admire your work as well. It's so nice for me to be able to connect with a soul, a very brilliant man as yourself, who's very much interested in the same things that I am. And it's like, when I started reading your books, I was like, oh my goodness, Pierre's got it. He's onto something here. It goes back into the antediluvian cultures and even further back. So I think it's really interesting. And I just want to say thank you. And, you know, I know there are people out there who will be too quick to cut down and bring down and condemn, but I am who I am. I am honest and truthful, and full of integrity. And, you know, and I'm just after, like you, Pierre, many others, the truth. And that's all I'm after.
Where can we buy your books if people want to go out immediately and buy all these great books, which I definitely recommend? Can you buy them from Amazon, or is there a specific website?
Well, the three books, I mean, A Passage to Eternity and Guardians of the Dead, and also the future book, they can be bought on Amazon. The other books, Believe and Reaching for the Divine and Sky Crash Throughout Time, you can still get them through the publisher. Don't get them through Amazon because they charge ridiculous amounts of money from private sellers. But certainly the other books you can get through Amazon as well. So yeah. Thank you very much, Pierre. I'm so delighted to come on your show, and very happy to have spent some time discussing and philosophizing and also going through different subject matters, which are very fascinating and interesting.
Well, thank you again for appearing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.